My name is Kelly Nall, and this is my senior thesis, Laclede County's Bloody Highway 66. First off, I want to apologize for if the PowerPoint seems kind of off, is I couldn't figure out how to embed YouTube. That's like a whole different language to me. So I'm actually recording with my camera my PowerPoint. So if you probably will hear random clicks me moving the PowerPoint. So I will apologize in advance. I will post the PowerPoint on the discussion file, so if anybody wanted to see a clear video of it, you can. Why did I choose the topic? I choose it because I've lived in Laclede County for about 20 years now. I'm originally from Florida. I've come here because of family. The town's an interesting town. We actually have a book that's kind of written by us, by the author of Shepherd of the Hills. If you look up the book, Calling of Dan Matthews, that's actually about Lebanon, Missouri. Lebanon we don't honor that because it's not exactly the most favorable book about this town. And Route 66 actually does play a big role in Laclede County in Lebanon. Today, Route 66 is called Elm Street, and Elm Street is one of the main arteries in this town. It's east to west. If anybody has driven through Lebanon, Elm Street starts from if you're coming from Waynesville to Springfield, if you get off on the sleeper exit and you head to the racetrack, that is Old 66, you follow that and eventually will turn onto Elm. Elm will take you by Walgreens and various spots to take you eventually on out the outer road by hotels, restaurants. One of the biggest tourist attractions is the Munger Moss Hotel, which was running during the Route 66, and it is still running today. I believe Laclede County is actually the home to the real Bloody 66. Throughout Highway 66, there's areas where other places call a bad spot of the highway. But Laclede County has several, I believe it's the real one because first off, you have the geographical area. We are located in the southwest part of the Ozarks Mountains. We are home to two major rivers that run through the county. You got the Niagara River and the Gasconade River. The Gasconade intertwines with Highway 66 and the currently I-44. During that time, cars eventually became common, and at the time there wasn't as many when it's built, so they came two-lane highways. Well, Laclede County has hills and curves, so it's not exactly the best thing. When you're driving a small country road, it turns and... Sorry about that. It turns and crosses, so you are driving throughout that. And two-lane, if you're not careful with the curves, accidents occur. Just even if you look down for a second or glance at the speed. Speed, alcohol, and weather conditions. Highway travel is new. So we're going to sit there, and people, there's not really much of a speed limit. Alcohol was still readily available, and then you're not realizing, you're driving this machine, and weather does play a part. And that's going to be a factor in a lot of the cases I had studied over a 18-month span from July of 1955 to December of 56. The victims of these car accidents came from all walks of life. They were young children to older men to soldiers that came from the fort. I looked at the wrecks I will talk about in here. There's about 26 of them. Now we start with the Ozark Mountain terrain. We are the foothill of the Ozark Mountains. We are all familiar with living in the Ozarks. There's hills, caves everywhere. If you go along from me driving to Waynesville, you run along caves. And like I said, there's the two main rivers that flow, which was the Niagara and Gasconade. And the Indians that lived here were able to had trails they followed throughout this area. And the trails eventually are what we drive around today till. They knew how to work with Mother Nature and the hills to go along it. In 1937, the wagon trails came for traveling. It drove to the wagon trails came from St. Louis to Springfield, and it stopped through Laclede County. We had the telegraph that was created during the Civil War, and came along the wagon trails. In 1868, the Frisco Railroad came to Laclede County in Lebanon. Now, what was funny about the story is Lebanon history has that the railroad wanted to come through the actual town, but the people did not want the railroad, and they fought with them. Well, the railroad said okay, and they moved 2 or 3 miles south of Lebanon, where the land was actually cheaper. Well, the town began to move itself and grow closer to the railroad. So today in Lebanon, if you ever hear the town of Old Town, Lebanon, that's actually where the settlement of Lebanon was before the railroad tracks. And Newtown's how it's grown since the Frisco Railroad. In 1927, the automobile became more and popular way to travel. And there was talks of highway that would connect to St. Louis to Las Vegas, Nevada. And then in 1921, the Centennial Road Law passed, which is basically a way where they could create more highways for travel. Everybody wanted it in. It was East Coast, main arteries. All these towns wanted in. So they went to Missouri, part of it, went to Jefferson City to have a meeting to discuss it. While in Jefferson City, there was 2 routes that were proposed. You got the Rolla route, which was Rolla, Mountain Grove, and Springfield, which would actually go down. And then you have the Rolla, Waynesville, Lebanon, Marshfield, and Springfield, which is actually the current route today. The Mountain Grove, Springfield, Rolla route criticized the fact that they believe they should get the route because Rolla, the route right now the other route is the Frisco route. And they claim, why should a Frisco route also have a road route when you have a road route along there? But Lebanon was part of the direct path, and eventually the roads went that way. When they announced the roads, everybody was excited, and the naming became popular. If you never realize this in the naming of roads, anything that is odd number goes north and south. Anything that ends in even number goes east to west. So like if anybody's familiar with Highway 5 in this area, then it actually goes north and south. And I-44, 66 goes east and west. Well, originally they wanted the 0. And they thought it was going to be I-60. And the reason why they wanted it the 60 because the 0 was such a prestigious name. And everybody was calling it I-60, even though it wasn't really confirmed yet. Well, they were so sure that maps were printed saying that it was going to be I-60. In August 1926, it was announced when it was going to become Highway 66, Route 66. Now, even before they laid pavement down in 1927, there was actually still accidents. And most of them were just small, common ones. There was a 4-way stop at Highway 5 and Highway 66. If you've been in Lebanon before, it is the Jefferson Elm light, which basically, if you've been along Jefferson, it's the light where Walgreens, Smitty's, and Elm Street Eatery are. That is kind of the main area. Some people nicknamed it the Big Light because it's the big turn in this town. Well, 2 wrecks happened. First one was a gentleman that was going to a dog show with his wife, and they lost control and ended up in a ditch. The next one was two cars that just didn't stop at the stop sign and hit head on. Both of those accidents were very minor for the time. Now, fast forward to 1956. You got the cars became more affordable and more people started traveling along the main highways. So I counted during this is where my paper begins. In July 2nd, there was 2 3-car wrecks. They were both very minor wrecks. And most of them were caused by sideswiping and just kind of hitting each other. Our first major wreck fatality was on July 16th. It occurred 7.2 miles east of Lebanon. It was actually a head-on accident at the 66 curve. One of the passengers was dead on arrival. It killed both cars got demolished from that. They believe what happened was a car was trying to pass another car in the eastbound lane, and that's kind of head-on. By August 8th saw the tragic death of a family. A 1949 model sedan carrying the Colin family was hit by Kenneth Watson of Springfield. Watson crashed the rear of Colin's family's Nash sedan. The Nash then spun around and plunged over a 10-foot embankment. The sedan caught on fire. The driver, Murray Nash, escaped out of the vehicle. His clothing was burned off of him, and he had about 60% of second and third degree burns. His mother and his sister were trapped in the car and burned to death. 2 days later, the driver, Murray, passed away. And then another tragic one was September saw the death of a gentleman going to his daughter's wedding. This one was caused by weather and wet pavement, where he just started his trip from Cuba, Missouri, and he ran off the road and tried to correct himself. Well, he got in the path of a truck, and the head-on collision threw the gentleman Carter out of the truck and dragged his body along the road. The newspaper reported the accident crushed his skull, and his right arm was barely on his body. The next day, a Marine dies, and it was reported another victim of Bloody 66. The paper remarked that the Marine was either attempting to pass another vehicle or it was asleep at the wheel. Another soldier was driving on the wrong side of the road. They weren't sure, again, if this soldier fell asleep at the wheel or tried to pass. October, actually, in one paper, had 2 stolen car wrecks. The first one was a couple soldiers decide they're going to steal another soldier's car in St. Robert and go joyriding. Well, they were joyriding, and it was reported the car was going 80 miles per hour, and they lost control and hit a culvert. The driver was killed instantly. The second wreck happened 11 miles outside of Lebanon. 14 boys from Indianapolis, Indiana, was driving a stolen truck from Illinois. It was believed the boys robbed a gas station. The boys were going, at least was speeding, and they just ran off the road. They ran off the road, and they only received minor cuts, and they were placed in Laclede County Jail. Then November brought us 2 bridge wrecks. They're in 2 different areas. The first one was the Hazel Green Bridge, which, if you can see the Hazel Green Bridge on I-44. If you're driving to Lebanon, it's between, it's right before the sleeper exit. Will be on your left. It's a covered bridge. And the vehicles involved was a GMC moving van, a 1955 Oldsmobile, and a Chevrolet tractor trailer. The Oldsmobile passed a moving truck, and then the tractor trailer on a 2-lane highway. The Oldsmobile saw the traffic heading straight down and slowed down to get between the tractor trailer and moving van. The moving van could not slow down in time and hit the car. The wreck had stalled the traffic for over 2 hours. An hour before, they investigated a wreck on the Gasconade Bridge. Mr. Elmore Ward, 1955 Dodge, lost control and skidded off the bridge. Luckily, Ward's Dodge landed upright and he only escaped with minor injuries. December actually brought, the weather played a part in December's wrecks. We had 2 icy slick spots on the road. But luckily, both of them were minor wrecks. The first one was 8 miles east of Lebanon. A 1953 Plymouth lost control on a slick spot on a curve. The Plymouth started to roll and landed against the tree. The driver had only suffered a few injuries. The next one was located at the Phillipsburg Junction. The car had slid into another vehicle. There was another minor one. And then on the 15th of December, there was another wreck, which was the eastern curve of Lebanon. Private James Lee lost control and crashed into a deep ditch. Lee was thrown from the car. The car landed on top of him. His only complaint were back pains. The Nation had reported during the holiday season that there were 605 wrecks during the Christmas period. And actually, the first one in December was the first death in 35 days. A young soldier, Richard Burrier, were victim to an accident, a 2-car accident. He was a passenger in Private Dominic's Cosmos Plymouth. The Plymouth lost control and drove off of the pavement. Cosmo tried to correct it and ended up hitting another car. The right side of the Plymouth was ripped apart and he was killed instantly. In 1956, it actually kind of started, quiet. The first wreck occurred on January 18th. Jean Hunt was the first car victim of the fatality. The roads had been icy and slick that day, and she was trying to get up a hill to increase her speed. Well, she lost control, and she was swerving between the traffic. Her car was hit, and she was thrown out from the window. Her car continued to swerve until it finally ended up stopping right before it hit her, and she actually passed away from a skull fracture at the hospital. Another one at the end of the month brought us another one, which was, the first was the Eastern City Limits by Munger Moss. One car went to make a left turn and another car just kind of hit him. Minor injuries. The second wreck happened at the Western City Limits. A car was pulling out of the local club and was hit. The driver of the car coming out of the club was cited by the police for drinking and driving. And then by March brought 2 people from wrecks. Charles Jones passed away from head and chest injuries from a traffic wreck on the Eastern City Limits. Specialist Claude Ellis was killed right away from being thrown to his car. His body landed in a rock bank. Ellis was believed to be driving 70 miles per hour. One man did actually escape death in March. Lloyd Glove's 1950 Mercury went out of control on a curve. Mercury went through some bushes and stopped 70 feet from the road. He only served injuries from the wreck. Groves was actually cited for excessive speed. At one point, the car was going at 75 miles per hour in a 45 mile per hour zone. March 16th brought a tragic day from the Lebanon family. On May 16th, Lebanon Sr. was killed right before graduation. It happened 15 miles east of Lebanon. Larry Dean Crow fell asleep at the wheel on his way home from Lebanon. He was visiting his girlfriend in Richland. It is believed that he fell asleep and his car went to the wrong side of the road and hit a steel guardrail of the Hazel Green Bridge. Crow was crushed instantly. And that accident marked the 3rd year that a high school senior was killed in a car wreck. In June, another person fell asleep at the wheel, but ended up surviving. Grace Freckerson of Las Vegas fell asleep at the wheel and hit the guardrail on Bear Creek Bridge. Her car dangled 15 feet above the creek bed. She spent 45 minutes in the vehicle until she was rescued by 5 men. June saw a car being overturned. Mrs. Graham and her children survived being overturned. It believed she lost control and overcorrected. It happened on a weekend. The 4th of July, actually holiday weekend, brought some more wrecks. Brought one drinking and driving wreck. The second wreck was a sedan that was driven by a hitchhiker that a gentleman picked up. It had been speeding from 90 miles per hour. And the driver hit his head on a rock and passed away later on that day. August saw more car wrecks. On the 4th, it was a 4-person wreck. The players were a Cadillac, Diamond T truck, 51 Pontiac, and Southern Plaza tractor trailer. The 2 trucks came over a hill, and the Diamond T truck went to pass the other truck on the 2-lane highway. The Diamond truck hit the Cadillac and both overturned. The Pontiac ran into a ditch to avoid the accident. The driver of the Southern Plaza was cited for careless driving. Before Labor Day, Lebanon writer Lee Groans wrote about traffic accident in his August 10th edition of the Lebanon Daily Record. Over a 1-week period, over 200 people were killed on Missouri Highway. That is a total of 609 people for the year. Groans stated that this time last year, the highway death was only at 540 people. Earlier that week, 5 people had been killed on Route 66. He claimed that the number of people killed are more than the soldiers in the Korean War deaths. He pleaded to the public to be careful. They need to watch their speed, don't pass on hills, and make sure your car is in good running order. In December, the editor, Dwight Hilton, requested a change for Missouri roads. He asked for the highway patrol. He asked that the highway patrol pay more attention. He believed that they should raise the driver's age from 16 to 17. He believes the 16-year-olds fall in that crack of the laws because of the age, because they're still technically juveniles. He believed that there also should be strict fines and punishments for speeding, drinking. And he asked also for more people for education. Learn about driving correctly. Don't pass people. That they need to spread the word out. That year, and from that same article, an article from Chicago that was quoted in there said that it is expected over 660 deaths over that holiday period. It is predicted by the National Safety Council that the deaths will reach an all-time high in 1956 Christmas holiday season. By that year, they knew that Route 66 needed some changing. So they decided to do a bypass to help ease the traffic off of Route 66. They wanted to expand it to a 4-lane highway to help lighten the load, and then the bypass would help kind of get it off. Well, Eisenhower signed an act, the Federal Highway Act, that would actually create an interstate highway out of the nation. They wanted these superhighways to be a straight line. It's believed that the traffic would actually flow faster than the curves on the highway that are in place now. By doing this, the Missouri road builders faced the challenge of molding the land for straight highways. Some hills of the Ozarks had to be leveled. Bridges and culverts were built along the road. Many farmers lost their farm because of the superhighway. This bypass opened on August 8, 1957. And the bypass was 2.6 miles southwest, northerly 8.2 miles, and west 4.6 miles. The 4 lanes would be driving the traffic. By November 4th, the last of the pavement had been laid down in Laclede County. The I-44 would run parallel to Highway 66. By 1980, Missouri decommissioned the aging I-44. So, Laclede County was the true bloody 66. You had the land that wasn't driver friendly. You have the natural geographics of the curve in the mountains and the rivers. You had drivers that speed, alcohol, and careless people that were not paying attention to their surroundings caused a lot of the accidents. So I believe Laclede County was the true bloody 66 of Route 66.